Hey guys, Henry here welcomes you in another episode of Archaeology Unveiled. And in today's episode, we'll learn about Cleopatra and why she is called the most evil queen in ancient history. So stay tuned to learn more about it. The final Egyptian queen, Cleopatra, was one of Rome's most fearsome adversaries. She was the wife whose two husbands, who were also her brothers, passed away when they were young, one fighting against her, the other being killed on her orders. To boost her personal authority and political status, Cleopatra transformed into the mistress who picked her own companions for both pleasure and marriage. Cleopatra was a ferocious military and political leader who Rome was utterly scared of, not the breathtakingly attractive woman that Hollywood portrays her as. In actuality, Cleopatra had no Egyptian blood in her veins. She was a descendant of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family with Macedonian roots, and was born Cleopatra VII Philopator in Egypt. She was, thus, formally of Greek descent. Even Cleopatra derives from the Greek meaning father's glory. Fluent in numerous languages, exceptionally knowledgeable in astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy, Cleopatra was well suited to participate in any political or economic conversation. The video seeks to present the true Cleopatra, a ruthless queen willing to do everything it takes to maintain her position of power, no matter the cost. She remained one of the most significant political personalities for 22 years before her shocking passing, which left an enduring imprint on human history. The romantic Hollywood portrayals of the lovely and kind pharaoh of ancient Egypt are a far cry from this tale. The Diadochi, Alexander the Great's most powerful generals, split his empire after his death in 323 BC. The Ptolemaic monarchy, based in Egypt, was one of the most powerful of the Diadochi states. It was established in 305 BC, the year Ptolemy proclaimed himself king. Along with Egypt and Libya, he also controlled Phoenicia and a few Mediterranean islands. In a newly independent Egypt, the Egyptians recognized the Ptolemies as the pharaoh's replacements. The daughter of King Ptolemy XII, Cleopatra, was destined to rule the Macedonian dynasty as its final monarch. Plutarch, an ancient author, noticed the intriguing fact that she was the only one of her kind to have taken the trouble to learn Egyptian, making it unique. Her parents were likely at least half-siblings because incest was widespread in many great royal families. She married not just one, but two of her brothers while she was in power. When Cleopatra and her 10-year-old husband took control of Egypt, she was 18 years old. There was a lot of fighting since she had no intention of sharing the crown with her brother. She even went so far as to guarantee that just her name was engraved on coins and erase his name from various documents. The animosity between Cleopatra and her husband only grew as a result of his disinterest in her attempts to surpass him. After being driven out of Egypt, Cleopatra collected her troops in Syria. She went back to battle her brother at Pelusium, which is on the eastern frontier of Egypt. In 48 BC, the murder of the Roman general Pompey, who had fled Ptolemy XIII at Pelusium, and Julius Caesar's arrival brought about a brief sigh of relief. To reclaim the throne, Cleopatra understood that she required the assistance of the Romans, particularly Caesar. Both parties tried to use the other to further their objectives. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, left behind debts that Caesar was trying to pay off. At the same time, Cleopatra aimed to hold on to her position of authority while also trying to revive the early Ptolemy's glory and their dominance over areas like southern Syria and Palestine. If you like what we do, support us by subscribing to the channel. All of these incidents contributed to the blossoming, intense romance between Caesar and Cleopatra. They were detained in Alexandria for a winter. Ptolemy XIII fled in the spring when Roman forces came. He eventually drowned in the Nile River while trying to flee. Then, Cleopatra wed her brother Ptolemy XIV, regaining the kingdom in the process. She gave birth to a boy in June of 47 BC. And she named him Ptolemy Caesar, also referred to as Caesarion or Little Caesar by the Alexandrians. One of the unanswered questions of antiquity is still whether Caesar was indeed the father of Caesarion, as the name implies. In 46 BC, Caesar won the battle against Pompeian opposition after 2 years of conflict. He enjoyed a 4-day triumph as he marked his victory. At least one official trip to Rome was made by Cleopatra, who traveled with her husband's brother and son. She visited Caesar's private estate across the Tiber River and perhaps went to see a golden statue of Venus Genetrix, the grandmother of Caesar's Julian family, unveiled there. When Caesar tragically died in 44 BC, Cleopatra was still residing in Rome. In 44 BC, not long after she returned to Alexandria, Ptolemaic IV passed away. His death is thought to have been caused by Cleopatra herself, according to historians, so that she might rule with her little son Ptolemaic v Caesar. Mark Antony assumed control of Caesar's empire when his assassins were vanquished at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. Or so it appeared, because Octavian, Caesar's great-grandson and personal successor, was a young child at the time. Mark Antony, a general and close friend of Caesar, called Cleopatra to ask if he could trust this strange woman who had captured the attention and loyalty of one of the most powerful men. He wished to explain Cleopatra's status following Caesar's assassination, because he now ruled Rome's eastern regions. She departed for Tarsus in Asia Minor with a bag full of gifts, postponing her trip on purpose to heighten Antony's eagerness. She entered the city on a barge on the Cydnus River, dressed as the new Isis, and enchanted Antony, who imagined himself to be the deity Dionysus. In spite of Fulvia's efforts to defend her husband's interests in Italy at the time against Octavian's ascent, Antony accompanied Cleopatra back to Alexandria, where he treated her as a legitimate ruler rather than merely a protege. Cleopatra and Antony established a group of inimitable livers at Alexandria, whose behavior has been characterized either by insanity and craziness or by a devotion to the enigmatic god Dionysus by historians. In reality, Cleopatra and Antony had their own clandestine drinking club called the Inimitable Drunkards, which is akin to an alcoholics club. The two started the organization, which was known for its all-night parties, vice, and excessive amounts of booze, allegedly to pay homage to the god Dionysus. But it was really just about enjoying oneself. Along with these celebrations, Antony and Cleopatra were rumored to have been seen in disguise roaming Alexandria, the vibrant center of ancient Egypt, and pulling practical jokes on the unwary inhabitants. Pliny the Elder's writings claim that Cleopatra once bet Antony that she could spend 10 million sesterces, roughly equivalent to nearly $10 million in today's money, on a single banquet. Antony scoffed at this immoral notion and agreed to the wager, thinking it impossible to afford such a lavish dinner. The couple shared a fairly ordinary dinner that did not indicate they had spent such a large quantity of money. After supper, Antony believed he had prevailed in the wager, but Cleopatra called a servant and requested a cup filled with potent vinegar. Cleopatra dropped one of her enormous pearl earrings into the cup as the servant brought the vinegar. The priceless pearl started dissolving in the vinegar mixture. Cleopatra drank the concoction when the pearl had entirely vanished. Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene were the names of the twins that Cleopatra gave birth to in 40 BC. By the time he arrived in Italy to handle business, Antony had already left Alexandria and formed a temporary alliance with the already stronger and more powerful Octavian. He wed Octavia, Octavian's sister, to solidify the relationship. His wife Fulvia had passed away by this point. 3 years later, Antony understood that the Octavian reconciliation was not having the expected impact. He moved towards the east to find Cleopatra after realizing that his marriage to Octavia was now pointless. Cleopatra wanted the restoration of considerable portions of the eastern Egyptian empire, including vast territory in Syria and Lebanon, as well as the thriving balsam orchards of Jericho in exchange for Antony's request for financial support for his postponed Parthian invasion. Julius Caesar's successor presented Cleopatra as an evil seductress who used her position as a lady to make Antony a traitor, despite the fact that she was still unaware of the diabolical scheme and was only roused by Antony's flight. Both the Parthian campaign and the fleeting capture of Armenia turned out to be expensive disasters. But after Antony's triumphant return to Alexandria in 34 BC, a dramatic ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria took place. People gathered to watch Cleopatra and Antony sit on gilded thrones on a silver stage with their children next to them on slightly lower thrones. Antony disputed Octavian's legal status as Caesar's adoptive son and heir by announcing that Caesarion was his son. Caesarion was crowned King of Kings, while Cleopatra was named Queen of Kings. Armenia and the provinces beyond the Euphrates were given to Alexander Helios, while his younger brother Ptolemy received the lands to the west. Cleopatra Selene, their sister, was made the ruler of Cyrene. Octavian, who was watching from Rome, realized that Antony wanted to govern the civilized world with his enormous family, which sparked a propaganda war. The winter of 32-31 BC saw Antony and Cleopatra in Greece. The Roman Senate waged war on Cleopatra and relieved Antony of his next consulship. The Egyptians suffered a terrible defeat in the Battle of Actium on September 2nd, 31 BC, when Octavian fought the combined armies of Antony and Cleopatra. While Antony prepared for his decisive fight, Cleopatra sought safety in her mausoleum as they escaped to Egypt. In August 30th BC, Octavian, who was on the verge of ultimate control, invaded Egypt with the aid of Agrippa. Without any other place to turn, Antony stabbed himself in the chest with his sword, thinking that Cleopatra had already committed suicide. When he found out that she was still alive, his friends took him to her mausoleum where she was hiding, and he died in her arms. After Cleopatra was taken prisoner by Octavian, she was permitted to perform Antony's funeral rituals. She made repeated efforts to commit suicide until finally succeeding in doing so in the middle of August after realizing that she was destined for Octavian's victory in Rome. Caesarion and Antilochus were executed by Octavian, but Julius and Antony's children by Cleopatra were spared. Although classical authors assert that Cleopatra employed aspen, a representation of heavenly royalty, to end her life, the precise circumstances of her passing are still unknown. After nearly 22 years of rule and 11 years of marriage to Antony, Cleopatra passed away at the age of 39. As requested, she and Antony were interred together, and the Roman Republic died with them. For more similar videos, you can subscribe to our channel.